Back. You're still tuned into News and Views with myself, Salah Makudi, and it's time for hashtag Africa Focus feature. This is a part of a show where we look at some of the biggest stories on the African continent. And this time around, we'll be looking at Zimbabwe, our neighbors to the north, are once again back in the global diplomatic spotlight. This is after being elected to a non-permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council. Very significant. It marks the country's third time on this powerful body, influential body, where it will join other African states in what is known as the A3, a grouping expected to push for stronger African Union-led solutions to conflicts on the African continent. But I think what's interesting for me is this shall we call it the diplomatic win for Zimbabwe. It comes at a very, very interesting time. Very politically sensitive moment back home in Zim, where President Emerson Mnangagwa is also facing growing attention over reported internal debates within ZANU-PF about a possible extension of his term beyond 2028. Development that has reignited a lot of conversations about constitutional limits, succession politics, and just Zimbabwe's general democratic trajectory. And we're going to be unpacking all of this. Zimbabwe being in the UN Security Council seat, what does it really mean for them? And Zimbabwe's global standing, and how does it sit alongside the political currents back at home? And to help us unpack all of that, we're joined by Ashraf Patel, researcher associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue. Ashraf, salamu alaikum. Always a pleasure having you on News and Views. Welcome.
Walaikum salam, Salalo and listeners. Hope you're all well.
No, well, really, really excited and looking forward to be having this conversation with you. And I want us to jump right into it. The biggest story, I think, for the SADC region has obviously been Zimbabwe having secured a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council for 2027-2028. How significant is this return to the global stage for Harare? Is it something to be celebrated? What should the rest of the African continent make of it?
That is quite significant in international relations, noting that the UN Security Council is the highest decision-making body of the UN, the permanent, as well as part-time members, at least another 10, and these are elected on a 2-year basis. So for Africa, it's a big win, noting that the election of Zimbabwe to the UNSC for these 2 years was voted by majority of members, and that is surprisingly a very positive boost for Zimbabwe, but of course for our Southern African region and the continent as a whole. Remember that the last time a country from our region was on the SC was South Africa in 2018-2019. So this is a boost for the region and hopefully for the continent.
No, most definitely. What would you say? I mean, looking at Zimbabwe and maybe their patterns within the UN, what should be their major points of priority right now? I know that Zimbabwe will be joining a bloc, I think it's called the A3 bloc, alongside countries like the DRC. Liberia, I think, is in that bloc also. For those African countries in that very, very important UN Security Council, what's of priority right now for the continent and for Zimbabwe specifically?
Well, massive challenges. Look, the last 2 years have been significantly challenging for Africa. In fact, many IR scholars cite this current period in Africa as the most depressing. The AU has always signed all these fancy protocols on peace and security, called Silencing the Guns Initiative, but rarely has Africa seen so many spiraling conflicts. There is Sudan civil war, the civil war in South Sudan, the Ethiopian Eritrean conflict, the DRC conflict has mushroomed over several years, primarily around critical minerals, access to critical minerals. And there we see great power competition. US, China, South Africa, Gulf states, for those criticals, scarcity. Then we see oil and gas in northern Mozambique that attracted the phenomena of corruption. Hopefully Zimbabwe and the agenda, as well as the Southern African agenda. And I think as South Africa hosts the SADC summit in early August this year in South Africa, these issues of regional integration, regional industrialization, the need to add value to minerals, they are segueing into important big elephant in the room, which is economic development. The lack of economic development in most parts of Africa is causing, for instance, South Africa's massive inward migration from these countries because governance and economies and have collapsed. So they're all integrated. And then, of course, all the challenges of climate change, the El Nino phenomena that has affected drought in most parts of both Zimbabwe and Southern Africa. So we're dealing with multitude of crises. And so UN Security Council seat allows members to prioritize these issues in their region and then take it further up the ladder of the apex UN Security Council agenda, which is carefully crafted and managed by the big five powers. Either in the P5, and those allies are primarily China and Russia. Mm-hmm. So the BRICS core in the UNSC would give significant space for Zimbabwe to take on and bring to the table some significant issues for Africa and the region.
Very, very important. This is not Zimbabwe's first rodeo. This is their third term, if I'm not mistaken, on the council. Just looking at, internally, the country in itself, how would you say their foreign policy approach has changed since its previous terms in the UN Security Council? I think it was in the 1980s and the 1990s where they had a stint in the council. Any differences from that time to where we currently find ourselves when it comes to their foreign policy?
Interestingly enough, yes, that's a question. Yes, I think the fundamental shift in those 2 years, and that Zimbabwe's the center of lots of governances with the Mugabe administration, the land challenges. Most of that has been resolved. In fact, just last month, Zimbabwe finally reached to the white farmers, for instance, and that has created a stronger kind of trust with the government and the farming community. But you must remember, Southern Africa faces massive urbanization challenges, and there needs to be massive investment in urban infrastructure, as well as industrial development. Zimbabwe and other countries like Mozambique are kind of showing leadership in SADC by ensuring mines and mineral linked to beneficiation. Mozambique just passed a new mining beneficiation strategy that says that all lithium and other critical minerals, has to have beneficiation in industrial development to ensure a greater value of those resources. So these are quite approaches to development, and that is something they offer. Definitely, there are gaps in the human rights side, Zimbabwe and other countries in Southern Africa. You look at Swaziland, is still under a dictatorship. Ironically, both the US and the EU has failed relations with the Swazi dictatorship, but frosty relations with Zimbabwe, ironically, around what is called democracy. So all of these narratives are subject to. What we do see going forward is massive focus on the war. Many wars, the DRC conflicts, mushrooms. Imagine that to be would kind of segue itself up the ladder on the UN Security Council. There may just be a resolution on that even this year around the DRC, the Ebola crisis, as well as the conflicts in that part of the world. So these are all interconnected. Health pandemics, lack of development, lack of good governance, and the peace and development agenda.
Very, very important to note. I want to come back, a bit closer to home, Zimbabwe, and the political landscape currently, because this is all happening while President Emmerson Mnangagwa is facing renewed political attention. That discussions within the ruling party structures about a possibility of an extension of his term. How does that domestic debate affect Zimbabwe's international image, and how important is that discourse?
Sure. Yes. Domestic challenges are immense. Good governance has always been a challenge and continues to be a challenge in Zimbabwe. Noting that South Africa hosts the largest population of foreign nationals from Zimbabwe is in South Africa. And those challenges at the state-to-state level would be the subject of discussions at the forthcoming SADC summit. Internally, the ease on paper a multi-party democracy terms are quite in favor of the ruling party, but it must be said that challenges are also opposition. The opposition in Zimbabwe has significant chaos amongst the opposition as a whole, and because they were not coherent as an opposition, unfortunately, it has also ensured that the current ZANU-PF has entrenched their positions. So it is something that the ruling party is strong, as strong as it is, also because of whether the opposition is coherent or robust. And when oppositions are weaker and chaotic, ruling parties are stronger. So I think that dynamic does play into where we see them going forward. They will naturally take Africa Union positions as well as SADC positions in the UNSC. And it's an interesting part. I mean, to be on the UNSC is very, very prestigious, although it's only for 2 years. Ironically, Germany, which is a member of the G7 and the EU, failed to get voted on the UN Security Council for this 2-year terms. And that raised a lot of eyebrows because Germany is the third largest contributor to the UN budget. Unfortunately, some of the international relations scholars have observed that there are several reasons. One is Germany's inconsistency regarding international law, the positions on the Gaza genocide, was in contradiction to the UN ICJ case, their positions on the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president. That was a contradictory position because cite international law, but they then give the to the US for that, and then contradistinction their positions on Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia. All of that has showed an inconsistency with the German position, and the global South was not impressed, and therefore Germany didn't receive the votes. Another factor being massive development aid cuts by the EU and Germany across the board, increased military expenditure. Germany's military expenditure in the last years has jumped 700%. That is a major red flag for the allies, or the old ally 5 would be in German militarism a century ago. So all those memories still remain in some way, and therefore today Germany could not be voted even as a member of the EC for 2 years.
Very, very interesting. Ashraf, unfortunately, we have run out of time. We're going to leave it here for now. Really, really appreciate your time and joining us for this very, very important development, especially for us here in the SADC region. Hope we chat again soon. Salam.
Wa alaikum salam.
That was Research Associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue, Ashraf Patel, give us insight on a very, very interesting development. Zimbabwe being voted in to the UN Security Council. This is not the first time, third time they are on the SC. The first time was in the 1980s, and they voted again in the 1990s. And it will be interesting to see what kind of positions they'll be adopting, considering that this is a new Zimbabwe of some sort under the leadership of Emerson Mnangagwa, who himself internally back at home is facing renewed political attention. This is amid those discussions that are happening within the ruling party structures, ZANU-PF, that he's possibly looking to extend his term as president of Zimbabwe. Interesting times. This has been #Africa Focus. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.
Soweto, it's time to stand together for justice, peace, and solidarity. Join us for the annual Soweto Walk for Gaza, taking place on Saturday, the 20th of June at 7:30 a.m. The walk will begin at the historic Regina Mundi Church and proceed to the monumentous Dlamini Mosque, bringing together people of all faiths, backgrounds, and communities in a powerful show of unity and support. Bring your family, friends, and fellow residents as we walk together for a common cause. Let your voice be heard and your presence counted. That's the annual Soweto Walk for Gaza, Saturday, the 20th of June at 7:30 in the morning, starting at Regina Mundi Church and ending at Dlamini Mosque. Together we walk, together we stand, together we show solidarity.